What is up, everybody? It is time for a Quake live demo react. Not a sentence I've said before, but we are going to be watching Clawz. This was requested by the community, and it is a video that was uploaded very recently by Ins, so shout outs to him. You can find his YouTube channel for more similar videos in the description below. And also feel free to check out that description below for the timestamps to jump straight into the game. But for those of you that are not sort of familiar with Clawz as a player, I'm going to give you a super fast rundown and some context as to why people are a little bit hyped by seeing him and why there's so much interest. So Clawz, who is he? Clawz was an extremely good arena FPS player that kind of burst onto the scene with Quake Champions. But as we scroll down through the Wikipedia page, we can see he was pretty active in Quake Live. He played a bunch of the tournaments and the weekly duel cups, and he got pretty deep playing some of the top players in these cups, but we didn't really see anything super remarkable. We can see that he didn't get a single map against Kilson Evil or Pavel, and obviously these were absolute top tier players in 2015. And then we get a 2-year gap where we get to Quake Champions releasing, and he just proceeds to win the highest prize pool event ever in a Quake in a Quake tournament in history over the last over 2 decades of Quake. There's never been a tournament, from what I understand, that's had $1 million in the prize pool dispersed between I think it was Sacrifice and Duel, and maybe one other game mode. I forget now, but either way, he won 2. And he got 500k that goes to him and his team. So that's pretty sick. And then this is when we see the era, the dominance of Clawz. As we scroll up, we see going into 2018, him winning a lot of tournaments, playing against, Cypher, Dahang, Rafa, and Razy, Cooler, like so huge names, and just proving himself to be an absolute top dueler, just cream of the crop. And he did so with a pretty oppressive aiming style. And I think actually, if I go to the main page, there's a bit of trivia, and I think this kind of sums up this fairly well, which is when asked why he plays so aggressive with the LG in a post-game interview, he answered, "I don't know, man. Easy." So there you go. But with that said, if we go back to the results page, you can see that he kind of starts to drop off in terms of the amount of tournaments that he's playing and the activity that he has. Kind of after Diabolical comes out in 2020, we see 2021 some activity, but then less and less, and until I think he goes sort of back to Apex Legends, where he is a player for a bit. And you can see there's a bunch of results here in 2020, 2021, so you can see that's what he was kind of spending his time on. And then eventually going into a coaching role, which is where he is still seemingly active. So to see him appear again in Quake Live all of a sudden, I think has people pretty excited, because the question is, are we going to see more of him? So as we go into this demo, we're going to be looking at his form and maybe doing some analysis on the actual game and maybe some tidbits as well. So let's jump into it. So he's playing against Zenaku, definitely a very competent, very good dueler. Someone that played a lot of Quake Champions as well, so super active over the last, the recent years. And immediately we see, Clawz hitting a lot of rails, which I believe is the theme of this video, this demo. And there's 2 ways to sort of look at dueling, I suppose. You can look at it on the scale of the balance between, how successful a player is on their dueling fundamentals and how well they're also executing the fighting skills. And just a quick note about what fighting skills kind of means. I like to break it up into 2 areas. One is mechanics, so your ability to move well, to hit shots, to just use their, I mean, everyone knows sort of really essentially at this point what mechanics kind of refers to in terms of your ability to execute shots and how clean that is. And then you've got the fighting theory. So, what weapon should I be fighting with? What position should I take? How should I be moving in the fight? Like, what fights do I want to take? Just all of that. That's the theory. So by bringing those 2 things together, the fighting skills and the mechanics, or the fighting theory and the mechanics, you get your fighting skills. That's kind of how I look at it. So that's one area. And then there's the other area, which is dual fundamentals. And you put all those 2 things together, and then you can kind of see which players kind of try to go a bit deeper on the fighting skills and which players go a bit deeper on the dual fundamentals. And some players are absolutely god tier at both at the same time. And obviously those are the best duelers. So right now what I'm seeing is Clawz has some good dual fundamentals, but I do get the sense that he just wants to rail people. He just wants to send a rail into his opponent's face, which is fair enough. And so here, just staying out there, hitting the rails. I believe there was a bit too much time until Mega was going to spawn, so it actually did make more sense to kind of go for the red first there, and then pressure onto the Mega. So not giving that one up. and then just fighting, just continuing to fight and keep the pressure on. And this is very much, you know, what Aerial Walk is about. When you're in Xenoku's position and you do have an opponent that's hitting this many rails against you, it can feel pretty scary. And, you know, there's various strategies you could try to employ. You could try to... There's two ways you can kind of maybe approach it. You might want to think, okay, what can I do to sort of limit the damage I take on the longer range? Because you don't want to take damage on long range, because if you do so, you essentially remove your stack advantage. And that means you can't use that stack advantage to bully onto a position for an item where you're going to take more damage than your opponent, or to bully them and try to get in their face to actually find a kill. And that's where they want to find damage. They want to find damage at the long ranges because, you know, you as the opponent, you can't jump on them with rockets and finish them off. So that's one thing to think about here. As I'm saying all this, you know, Clawz is running around the map hitting every rail. So there is a certain point where the duel theory and trying to optimize and min-max these types of things, it can be pretty difficult. It can be pretty difficult sometimes to limit your opponent's angles. Just reversing, just for a moment, someone I think that does have insane level of fighting skills as well as dueling skills is obviously Rafa. He's the best dueler in the world. So he's someone to look at if you want to see the highest level of duel fundamentals applied with very high level mechanics. He's able to find ways to control fights, no matter whether he's in control or out of control. That's very impressive. Always limiting your ability to, you know, to move into certain spots and really messing with your timings and your pathing consistently. That's something Raf is so good at. So I would say there's nothing really, you know, amazing going on here from a duel fundamentals perspective, but what is cool is that we're just seeing Clawz just dominating a very good dueler with his just rail alone, which is always, it's always a possible thing that can happen on a map like this. You know, you can lose to players that are sort of like worse to you for sure on a map like this, because if they just hit a string of, you know, 10-20 rails in a row, which can happen, you know, it's kind of hard to compete with that sometimes. But it's cool just to see a Clawz just running around having fun, hitting shots. We're getting a look in as well to seeing, you know, what's this form look like? You know, and just a bit of a throwback for some of you. One of the super exciting things in Quake always was just seeing like the form tests of the pro players, so you kind of get a sense as to what you can expect when they play a tournament. And this has changed over the years. Like now we have way more visibility. Like we get this demo of Clawz on a public server, you know, able to get this one up on YouTube for everyone to see. And even if not, you know, someone might have been streaming it, or somebody else could have done that too. So it's very easy to get this footage. Whereas in the old days, it was actually very difficult to get a hold of all these pros and their footage, because they'd be playing on private servers. They wouldn't necessarily want those demos to be released to anyone. There's a bit of an honor code around that. So you know, you would not really know of the form of your favorite duelers going into a massive event. And, you know, for some extra fun at events like QuakeCon, where it had like this unique format of deciding seeding, where you would play an FFA game with people from the BYOC to decide seeding. So that got kind of awkward for some players, like the Russians, who were just hardcore dueler players. And because you get like some of these nasty CTF like Americans that would be in the BYOC that would just throw themselves into the duel tournament for fun. They could really frag in like an FFA setting and have really good aim. And so you'd have some of the Russian players who just don't play that type of game mode struggling to like make a good seed for their duel tournament. Whereas in contrast, you'd have people like Fox or CZM, some of these super top tier duelers that were very good team deathmatch players as well. So they're very, very good in that format. And you get to have like this look at their form and see them running around for the first time in maybe like a month or two. And that was always like really fun, like seeing that form of those players and just assessing how on their flicks are, how their tracking looks, how their movement looks, and all of that. So it's very, very cool how things have changed over time. And so here, you know, we've got again the buzz around Clawz, because we all know that his capability to win tournaments, to be a devastating force, is there if he decides that he wants to actually put the time into playing. And from what I can see right now, you know, like I mentioned, we don't have this focus on super strong duel fundamentals. There's some just basic duel fundamentals for Aerial Walk, but it's mostly about how good his fighting skills are and how good his aim in particular is with the rail. Clawz is a player that has a very high skill floor, so it won't take him much grinding to get really, really good. And his time practicing will be spent more efficiently because all he'll need to really correct is just the dual fundamentals, how he can kind of incorporate those. And by playing really good players, he'll get a pretty fast sense of what that needs to look like. So yeah, this could be really fun now that we have a bit of a resurgence for Quake Live. But you'll have to forgive me if I'm not doing a lot of analysis on this particular duel. I think we're just enjoying Clawz running around, hitting these shots. Nice rockets there. I mean, in reality, Zeneku did a good job of keeping the score like relatively close for a decent amount of time, considering that, as we can see on the scoreboard just for a moment there, 70% rail connected. Thousands of damage done with the rail alone by Clawz. Over 5,000 rail damage there. So Clawz is just really going for it. And obviously this is a practice game too, so Clawz is going to be taking probably, you know, some peaks that maybe he wouldn't be taking. You know, spots where he maybe be thinking more about positioning and not exposing himself to damage. Instead, it's like, fuck it, I'm playing Airwalk, I'm playing a practice game, I'm getting a feel for the game again. I am going to just rail my opponent in the face and re-peek and re-peek. You know, we love that, like running up these stairs into the LG with rockets. It's not advisable, but there we go. It still turns out that it works out for Clawz. Zeneku looking to finish him off, then gets railed twice in a row at close range. You know, that's kind of how it goes. So definitely have to keep our eyes peeled on whether or not Clawz decides to sign up for some tournaments. Inns does have some more demos of him on his channel, as far as I understand.
1 minute warning.
When it comes to, like I mentioned previously, playing against this style, you know, you want to try to limit their ability to do longer range damage. But the other thing here is that Clawz is just railing at close range and medium range. Like, he's railing at every range. So it's pretty hard to limit your exposure, limit the fights, keep the scoreline close. With Airwalk, you can kind of, it can be very snowbally because sometimes it feels like the best choice. That's a great shot. The best choice is to just try to like damage your opponent and just keep him low and then finish him off by just like rushing him off the spawn. But then you get into a spot where you get stuck in that cycle and you've given away 10 frags in a row, and then that commits you further into the same approach because you're so far behind, you have to get frags back. So, you know, the foot never comes off the pedal in a situation like that. It's part of what makes the map fun to watch though, and also fun to play. And there we go. We've got a pretty devastating, it's over 7,000 damage with the rail. 32 of the kills were with the rail, 3 with the rocket, 1 with the LG. I find this to be particularly unusual, especially as someone that gets most of my kills with the LG, even on a map like Airwalk, because it's like super consistent damage. Maybe I need to switch things up and start being more of a rail demon. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I'll use this moment as well to say, hey, if you want to recommend that I check other stuff out, you know, feel free to drop it in the Discord. That's kind of how I came to this one as well. I had some people in my Discord who are recommending that I check this one out and record a video. And equally, I'm also on Patreon now, and that's a great way to, if you're in particular a fan of the podcasts, what I tend to do is I'll put upcoming episodes with certain guests as soon as I schedule it up on Patreon, so you guys know, hey, I'm going to be interviewing this guy or this character, you know, in the next few days. And if you want to submit some questions, you know, you'll be able to get your questions in specifically for those guests, and I'll pick you know what I can ask, depending on the time of the interview and so on and so forth. So with all that said, thank you all for supporting the channel. I will see you on the next video. Cheers.